After analyzing and rewatching One Piece for hundreds of hours, I noticed 13 things that don't make any sense. For example, we know that One Piece characters come in all shapes and sizes, but did you know that those sizes are changing every other arc? Think back to Luffy's flashback when Lucky Roo shoots the bandit. In this scene, Roo is clearly shorter than Shanks, and his height is probably around 5 feet. However, fast forward to the Marineford arc, and he has somehow grown to over 8 feet, being significantly taller than his captain. Another great example of this is Zoro's new sword, Enma. You see, when Oden and Zoro wield this sword, everything seems to be normal, right? Well, yeah, until you realize that Oden is actually over 2 times bigger than Zoro. With this in mind, Enma should be gigantic when held by Zoro, but for some reason, it isn't. Does Enma just shrink and expand to suit the user? Let's finish this part with something fun. What do you think is the height difference between Roger and Rayleigh? Think carefully. Believe it or not, there's actually a 3-foot height difference between them. This is only the first out of 13 plot holes we are covering today, and the last one will completely blow your mind. All right, so back in Alabasta, a certain someone made an interesting statement. After using his bird fruit, model Hawk, Pell declared that there are only 5 flying devil fruits in existence. Although this seemed realistic during the early One Piece, it quickly became nonsense, as there are way more devil fruits that grant flight. If you count Pell's Hawk, Marco's Phoenix, Kaido's Dragon, King's Tornadon, and Laffite's Angelic Wings, it's already 5 fruits. But there's more, of course. For example, Bion from the Tontada Kingdom has the Bugbo fruit model Hornet, and Kubu has the model Rhinoceros Beetle. Both of these obviously grant users the ability to fly. Moving on, how about Buffalo from Don Quixote Pirates and his Spin fruit? It literally creates propellers around the user and gives them the ability to fly. Since Shiki is also a confirmed canon character, we can also count his Float fruit, which, as the name suggests, is all about flying and making things float. I'd say this is more than enough evidence to debunk this statement. It's most likely that at one point, Oda really wanted there to be only 5 flying devil fruits, but ditched the idea later on. Another thing that makes 0 sense is how only 7% of people watching this channel are subscribed. I mean, seriously guys, click the subscribe button to fix this. It's absurd. Anyway, you remember how Vivi was a member of Baroque Works and worked under Crocodile during the Alabasta arc? At first, you may think there's nothing unusual with this, but I just have to ask, how the hell didn't Crocodile recognize her? You can argue that he doesn't know the face of everyone who works under him, and although that's true, he must have known what Vivi looks like considering she was one of the key members. She didn't even wear the mask or disguise herself in any way. Are we really supposed to believe that Crocodile, who had all kinds of information about the royal family and had lived in Alabasta for over 10 years, didn't know what the princess of the kingdom looked like? Not only that, but how is it possible that in the whole Baroque Works, which has over 2,000 members, nobody noticed that the actual princess is fighting alongside them? To be fair, we shouldn't go too hard on Baroque Works members. I mean, she did have her hair in a ponytail when she was Miss Wednesday, so maybe they just failed to make the connection. During the Wano arc, the Gorosei revealed that the real name of Luffy's devil fruit is Hitohitonomi model Nika, and that it is one of the devil fruits they fear the most. So my question is, why didn't they get rid of Luffy earlier before he had a chance to awaken it? And that's not all. Let's not forget that Luffy's first bounty had the name Monkey D. Luffy on it. Given the fact that members of D-Clan are always the ones who cause problems for the world government, doesn't it just make sense to capture them while they are still weak and inexperienced? And if you still think that's not a good enough reason, in his bounty photo, Luffy also wears Roger's legendary straw hat, which Imu must have noticed immediately. Now, to be fair, they did send some people after Luffy, but it never seemed as if they were taking it seriously. It was like Luffy was just another random pirate to them, which we now know is far from the truth. However, considering how Sabo managed to escape the room while Gorosei and Imu were around, it seems that these guys might not be the brightest. Although there are some ways you could try to justify world government's actions, this next plot hole about Sanji just straight up doesn't make any sense. You see, during Sanji's fight against Absalom back in Thriller Bark, we learned that Sanji used to be a massive devil fruit nerd. He even read the entire devil fruit encyclopedia. But for some reason during Baratie arc, when Luffy fell into the sea, he didn't pull him out. It wasn't until Zeph told him about the devil fruit's weakness that he jumped to save Luffy. You could argue that Sanji didn't remember this fact about devil fruits, but he sure as hell knew what he was talking about during Thriller Bark. Although this is a pretty big plot hole, it's nothing compared to the last one on this list. And while we are we're on the topic of Thriller Bark, do you remember how most of the zombies there were bandaged? This was because Hogback was conducting some serious experiments on them, like taking them apart and putting them back together. However, for some reason, when Moria spawned his zombies during the Marineford War, they were also bandaged, which shouldn't be the case, as Hogback never experimented on them. It's possible that Oda just liked the way they looked with bandages and decided to keep them that way, even though it doesn't make sense. Okay, let's now talk about Haki and what the hell happened to it during pre-time skip. Ideally, we should have learned about Haki in Zoro's fight against Mihawk, or maybe heard about it from Zeph, but we didn't. Luffy then fought against one of the 7 warlords, Crocodile, and somehow Haki was never mentioned during that battle. Even during the Enies lobby, when the Straw Hats fought against CP9, we still didn't learn about it. You could say that pre-time skip villains were pretty weak, and that's why they didn't know Haki, but what about Blackbeard versus Ace then? Surely these two use Haki during their battle. Nope, still nothing. It wasn't until Sabaody arc that we finally got to see Haki consistently, with Rayleigh and Luffy using it. Although you could come up with many explanations as to why this is the case, it's most likely that Oda didn't plan to include Haki when he initially started the series, and that's why the pre-time skip seems a bit off sometimes. Another thing during pre-time skip that doesn't add up happened during episode 314, when we were introduced to the 4 emperors for the first time. If you look at this picture, there seems to be something wrong with Kaido. He looks nothing like himself. He looks more like an evil mage with a wide face and a beak-like nose. Even hundreds of episodes later during episode 570, Kaido's silhouette still looks completely different. It wasn't until chapter 693 was released that Kaido started looking more like himself, and later his design was set in stone during his first appearance. So what exactly happened here? Well, although it's not technically a plot hole, Oda most likely had second thoughts on Kaido's initial design and wanted to change it. And since these two scenes are almost a decade apart, it didn't impact the story in any meaningful way, which can't really be said for this next one. So in the show, it was explained that the world government erased all information about 𝐲𝐬. But don't you still find it a bit weird how no one has ever mentioned the guy before? I mean, even Luffy still hasn't heard about him. Rox was the captain of the most dangerous pirate crew, as well as captain of 3 former emperors. Everyone in the world must have known who he was, so why does no one talk about him? We know the world government didn't literally erase him from everyone's memories, because Kaido and many Marines still remember him really well. I know Oda is making him out to be all mysterious, but still, the One Piece world should be more realistic than this. Only 4 more plot holes are left to cover, and let's talk about Sky Island next. Luffy and Zoro were absolutely humiliated for even thinking that Sky Island exists. They were literally beaten up and laughed out of the bar. But as it turned out, the Sky Island actually does exist. As the story progressed and we were introduced to more characters, it seemed like everyone went to the Sky Island. Even if we don't count the top tiers like Roger and Kaido, Uruge was seen preying on the Sky Island. And even good old Bellamy found his way up there. Despite everyone making the Sky Island seem like something super mysterious, it's not. It was even stated that there's a much safer way to get there somewhere in the New World. So it really doesn't make sense how more people didn't at least hear about it. Well, since we gotten this far, how about we discuss Chopper's ridiculously low bounty next? I know his bounty is used as comic relief, but after all this time, shouldn't the world government have realized that Chopper is more than just a pet? You could say that the world government never seen Chopper's real strength, but that's not really true. For example, during the Enies lobby arc, Chopper defeated Kumadori, a CP9 agent working directly for the government. This alone should earn him a sizable bounty. I'm not going to spend more time talking about it since it's obviously just a gag, but come on, give the little guy the proper bounty he deserves. Before we cover the biggest plot hole in the entire One Piece, let's quickly cover this one that I'm sure none of you noticed. In chapter 605, the monster trio is equipped with swim coating, which was supposed to allow them to breathe underwater, kind of like a diving suit. There is limited air inside these bubbles, so it is to be used wisely. However, Luffy immediately ignores the science and somehow uses Gear 3 while inside the bubble. This obviously shouldn't be possible, as there's no additional air for Luffy to use. What's even funnier is that only a few panels before, Frankie refrained from using coup de burst because their bubble air supply was limited. I guess the same exact logic doesn't apply to Luffy. Devil fruits are pretty straightforward. You eat them, gain some absurd ability, and you cannot be in the water for the rest of your life. However, there have been a few characters in the show who completely defied this logic. For example, when Boa was taking a bath, she wasn't feeling weak. It was a calm and relaxing experience for her. This is a bit weird because in reality, she should look something more like Luffy in this photo when he tried to take a bath. But let's forget about Boa for now. What the hell happened to Mr. 3 on this panel? You can clearly see that he is knocked out, but is somehow floating on water instead of drowning? However, the funniest mistake has to be this one in episode 989, when Kinemon literally hides underwater. To be fair, this is not Oda's mistake, as this specific scene doesn't exist in the manga, but still, you have to admit that it looks pretty funny. Click on this video where we covered 6 mind-blowing One Piece theories.